Hey, good afternoon. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from lovely Martinsburg, West Virginia, and welcoming you back to this Flash Class series, of course, presented to you by DonorSearch, as always. So happy to have you here and thankful to DonorSearch for providing a platform where we can have the top voices on philanthropy and fundraising speaking to you about the issues that are important for all of us and very passionately held by them. We certainly have that today with two returning presenters who really are lions in our field, and I'm very, very delighted to be able to provide an opportunity for them to speak with you again today. We also have Hannah Krobach here, who's in the background making sure all things are running properly, and it's also her birthday, so you can, from each of your offices, do a little shout out for Hannah, or you can even write her a little note if you wish in the text or the question section, just wishing her happy birthday. If it were not for Hannah, this series would not be operating as it does, so our thanks to her. Of course, for the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to take the opportunity to introduce or reintroduce this platform for you so you can make full use of it, as well as, right up top, tell you how you can get the slide deck and the recording of this session. So we'll begin right there. If you've heard all this before, it's a great time to get something nice to drink, grab your colleagues, gather them together, gather on your favorite electronic device. We'll be underway in just a minute. So we'll start with, of course, how you can get the content after the fact. You'll be happy to know, first of all, the slides will come directly to you by our presenters. So those will be sent to you, I'm sure, in just the next couple of days. Be on the lookout. If you don't see them, look in your spam folder, but you probably will see them just pop into your email, again, the next couple of days. As far as the recording, where all the additional excitement happens, all the answers to all your questions, that'll be available to you on the Flash Class library, which you can find by going to donorsearch.net, as you can see right on your screen right now. Go down to the Resources tab, toggle down to the Flash Class library, and if you were to click that, you'd find something just like this. It's recorded video search tool, which will allow you to sort by title, by presenter, keyword, and look for anything you want. Lots of great content here, including a couple of past presentations by the people today, but this one is special. So be on the lookout for that in the next couple of days, of course, but you'll find their previous presentations already up there with about 160 others in this tremendous content library. Of course, we do want you to interact, but we have silenced your microphones, so we won't be hearing any stray dogs in the background interfering with what we're about to hear. So we want to encourage you to go ahead and take a look for the Go-To Webinar Control Panel, and right in the middle of it, you should find the Questions tab where that bouncing arrow is right now. That's the place where we'd love you to go ahead and list any question or any comment at any time. And our presenters today want this to be as interactive as possible. So go ahead, list those as they occur to you. Don't wait, don't hesitate. List those questions right there, and I'll make sure to provide those to our presenters so they can answer them as they pop up. Now, of course, today's session is, of course, on the 6 critical tools you need for a successful campaign. And who better to do that than Amy Eisenstein, ACFRE, consultant, author, and speaker, and Andrea Kihlstedt, the founder of Capital Campaign Masters. These two have done so many things that trying to read their bios would take too much of their time, so I won't bother to do that, but I do want to call your attention to two really important recent things. First of all, they are the founders and co-creators of the Capital Campaign Toolkit. Be on the lookout for that. This is going to be another big leap in terms of making sure that campaigns can be conducted well by you. And also, you'll find in the recent issue of Advancing Philanthropy, the publication by, of course, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, a 12-page section on rethinking capital campaigns by who else but by these two really invaluable presenters. So with that, I want to throw the baton quickly over to Amy and Andrea with our thanks for returning to the Flash Class stage. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
All right, let's get started. I need to get my slideshow up and running here. All right, so today we're going to talk about the 6 critical tools you need to run a successful capital campaign. And as Jay just mentioned, I'm Amy Eisenstein. Andrea Kihlstedt is here with me as well, but we're just going to get right into it. And as Jay said, we are structuring this a little bit as much as we can like a conversation. So we encourage you to ask questions and add comments if you want throughout. Feel free to say hooray or I agree or what are you talking about or anything you want throughout as we go through these tools. And Andrea and I are just going to go back and forth as we go through the presentation. But I'm going to kick things off. We are talking about a new way to lead a successful capital campaign. And in the past, when you would, or any organization would consider a capital campaign, if the words capital campaign were uttered at your board meeting, the first thing that everybody would jump to do would be to call a capital campaign consultant. And that is because capital campaigns take place on average every 10 or maybe even 20 years at an organization. It's not something that you do every year. They're special, once in a while type of campaigns. And so that means that staff and most board members have not been through a full campaign from start to finish, or at least probably not more than 1 or 2 capital campaigns from start to finish. So for the most part, the people who have been through multiple campaigns and really understand the strategy and the structure of them are capital campaign consultants. And so in-house, development directors, executive directors, even board members, there's rarely expertise or the confidence that people feel that they have that they can lead a successful capital campaign from start to finish. But that is all changing. And that's what we want to talk to you about today, the new way to lead a successful capital campaign. And that's because now more than ever, there's no new resources, tools available, technology that enables and allows people in-house at organizations, just like you probably, to have access to the information you need to successfully lead a campaign. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Andrea, do you want to add anything before we get into it?
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and hi to everybody. It's so nice to be here. Jay and Hannah, thank you so much. And you know, I'm very excited about this topic. In fact, Amy and I have spent the last 2 years thinking about and talking about the new ways to think about a capital campaign. And one of them, and we'll get into it more, but one of them is that it used to be that when an organization was thinking about starting a capital campaign, the first thing they would do is to hire a consultant, because they didn't know what else to do. Honestly, they would have some board members pulling in this direction, some board members pulling in that direction, and you know, what else could they do? They would pick up the phone and hire a consultant. These days, you know, the information is more available. So while consultants are still valuable in some aspects of capital campaign fundraising, I think the mindset of how people get information is changing and how they communicate is changing. And what Amy and I are talking about today really is built on that idea that it's not only capital campaigns that are changing, but they are changing because we can communicate differently and get information differently in the world. And that's what's creating this new way. Back to you, Amy.
All right, great. Let's keep going. All right. So the first thing we want to talk about, we're going to talk about 6 key tools that you need to lead a successful campaign. But before we really get into it, we want to show you a document from our new capital campaign toolkit, and it's our capital campaign plan checklist. Because one of the most frequent questions that we get as consultants is, what goes into a capital campaign plan? How do we plan out our campaign? So here are some of the tools that you would need when you're developing a capital campaign plan. There's the statement of working goals, the statement of objectives, like what are your campaign objectives and what is your working goal. You want to have a gift range chart, a case for support, a donor recognition plan, campaign policies, campaign timeline, a committee structure, and a budget. And those are the primary tools and resources that you will need for your campaign plan. And so we're going to highlight a bunch of those today. but we just thought it would be useful for you to take a look and see what actually goes into a campaign plan, because a lot of times it seems very mysterious. And here it is. It's pretty straightforward. It's not mysterious at all. There are some concrete documents and decisions that need to be made as you're thinking about your campaign. And here they are. Andrea, want to add anything?
Sure, sure. I think, I was a capital campaign consultant for a long time, and I had the good fortune to be mentored by some people who are really experienced in the field. And for the longest time, when I first worked with clients, I wasn't quite sure what went into a campaign plan. I sort of knew these pieces, but I didn't realize that when put together, they became the structure, the bones, the skeleton of a campaign on which everything else hung. And so to me, to actually put that out there for people, to be able for people to see this and understand it and know it without sort of meeting it out as in the normal way, was like, oh yeah, I can do this. So I hope you feel that way too. If you put these documents together with a preliminary, with a preliminary statement, this is what we're raising money for, and a conclusion, you will have a campaign planning document that you can actually share with your board, with your steering committee, and it'll make people feel like you're well organized. Right?
It'll make you feel like you're well
yes,
organized.
In fact, you will be well organized.
Right? Yeah. So we're not going to have time to go through all of these tools. We've picked out 6 that we want to highlight with you today. So let's go ahead and show you the tools that we are going to talk about today. Number 1, timeline, really critical. Number 2, objectives and working goal. 3, a case for support. 4, a gift range chart. 5, the depth chart. And 6 is campaign policies. And some of these are easier. You've probably heard of many of them. A few of them may come as a surprise, or you don't really understand the theory or the strategy behind them, and hopefully we'll clarify that in the next 40 minutes or so.
But do feel free to pose your questions about any of them as they come up.
Absolutely.
And that came in right as you were at the top of the program. Drew asks, what are the key metrics in terms of annual giving to determine how much you can expect to raise in a capital campaign? That maybe talk about, but I want to make sure you heard the question now.
Yes, right. And just Jay, so I don't think Amy or I can see the questions as they come in. So.
Right. I'll be happy to read them to you as they do.
Just so you know that, because we're not attending to them. You'll have to highlight them, and why don't we come back to that question? It's a really good question. Let's catch it at the end.
Okay, don't let us forget, Jay. All right. So tool number 1 is the campaign timeline, and this is a campaign timeline. Andrea and I, as we were putting together our new project, the Capital Campaign Toolkit, this is something we really struggled with and worked very hard on to make as clear as possible. And so I think a lot of people, when they haven't been through a campaign from start to finish, they understand pieces of it, that you do some planning and a feasibility study, and then you raise some leadership gifts. But I really, to me, when ultimately we came up with this document, everybody wants to know how long everything will take. Just like that question, how much can we raise and how long will it take? I think those two of the most popular questions. And as you see from this timeline here, it can take a different amounts of time depending on how ready you are and what kind of fundraising operation you already have in place. So as you see from pre-campaign planning, we've put from 3 to 12 months. So it depends on what kind of development office you already have in place, is going to impact how long it will take. Same thing with the quiet phase. You'll see phase number 4 here, 6 to 24 months. That's when you raise your leadership level gifts for the campaign. And if you have a lot of donors who are close to your organization and you're already experienced at raising major gifts, this may not take so long. But if you have a lot of cultivation to do, it may take a lot longer. So we say on average that your campaign should take about 36 months, probably for a small to mid-sized campaign, not more than 3 years. But of course, you've heard of plenty of campaigns that go over that time frame as well. Andrea.
Amy, the shortest campaign I ever did, and it was for a really, really well organized, effective organization. I think the shortest campaign I ever did was 15 months, from start to finish, 15 months, just a little over a year. And I felt like we were at warp speed to get it done. They were successful, and it was crazy, but it worked because they had the relationships with the largest donors. They knew what they were going to raise money for. They were an efficient and effective development shop. Their board was solidly on board. They had all the pieces sort of lined up. So we just needed to make the campaign happen, right? When the pieces aren't lined up, not only does it take a while to get everybody moving in the same direction and to get all of the pieces of the plan together, but when an organization isn't well organized, even the decision making as you go tends to take longer. So here's the reason, however, that we think 36 months, you shouldn't probably go much over 36 months. After a while, everyone gets tired. And that's a reality, right? Executive directors get tired, board members, campaign chairs get tired. Everyone feels like it is a tremendously long slog when it goes over 3 years. So you don't want to have a campaign that is so long that people think it's stalled and you lose energy. And we find that 3 years is about when often that starts to happen. Now, an exception to that are these huge, big university campaigns. If anybody is here in a big university doing a $3 billion campaign, that's going to have a different way of looking at a timeline than this one, just to be clear, right?
Yes. Agreed. Andrea, why don't you start by talking about this wonderful wall chart you've developed?
Yeah, I will. This is really one of my favorite campaign tools, and we have it as a bonus in the campaign toolkit. I have played with these things for the longest time. Now you see this just on your screen on a slide. But what it really is a file that you can take to your local Kinko's. You can adapt it to fit your organization, and you can print it out 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. And you can actually some of our organizations laminate it, and then they use erasable markers that work on lamination, and they actually develop the campaign timeline in sort of a public space, right? They put it up in the boardroom, or they put it up in the development shop, and they can sit with a group of people saying, all right, what are the things we need to know that would go into which quarter of the campaign? And how does that affect the way we plan the other things in the campaign? And if you go down the left-hand side of this, organizations change this a little to fit their needs, but you can see the top one here is organizational events. That's things like, when is your gala? When are your regular board meetings? Is there a board retreat that's scheduled? Is there, what are the other things in your community you need to keep track of for timing? Then at annual fund, you would mark the key dates of your annual appeal. When do they happen? Just so you can see them. Then you put down your campaign planning. All right, the first quarter or two perhaps of your campaign planning, the lead gift phase, how and when are you going to solicit your board, right? Then the major gifts, which are the middle section of your campaign. You have an opportunity to put your campaign events down, and so on. The project timeline at the end. If you have a capital campaign that's raising money for a building, you probably will want to put down, okay, when are the architectural drawings done? When do we want to schedule the groundbreaking, or when is the shovel going in the ground? When is the building going to be finished? So if you have something like this on your wall, big, it can be a combination of stickies on it. It gets quite messy and wonderful. You can actually bring in your campaign committee and have them all look at it. It's like a shared document. And that does something very different than an Excel spreadsheet on your computer. Right? I just want to let that sink in for a minute, because I think the difference is so striking, right? When you're sitting looking at your computer, you may have a sense of the timeline, but your ability to sit with other people and say, listen, this is how it's going to fall out. This is the way we want to see it, does a whole different thing. So this is really one of my favorite campaign tools. I have played with these for years, and they're just remarkably effective.
Andrea?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
We
Jay.
have a question about the public phase, which is very prominent in this chart.
Yep.
Asks, if you decide not to go into a public phase,
Yes.
wrap up a
Yeah.
campaign and celebrate the funds raised in the quiet phase.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So here's the deal with the public phase. The public phase is the period in the campaign where you actually announce how much your campaign goal is. Right, Amy, can you go to one of the timeline
Yeah.
slides?
Yeah, we're gonna get
get to
into
that.
working goal, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
so let me just answer this quickly. So you can see here on this timeline that the public phase is this short little period, 3 months on this timeline, that happens after the kickoff and before the campaign, blasts over goal. The purpose of that is honestly less about raising money and more about building out your reputation and building building ahead of steam. So you can use the success of your campaign to draw new people in. So I advise you to have a public phase, even if it's 6 weeks or 3 months. It's your opportunity to say, we are almost there. Come in and help us. Right? It's a lot of work and a lot of effort, but think about it as the first part of your ongoing fundraising after the campaign. Okay, Amy, back to you.
All right, good. I just wanted to emphasize, when you're using this beautiful campaign timeline up on your wall, whether you laminate it and use different color markers, which we encourage you to do, or different color sticky notes, you can look down at each quarter and see what the workload is and shift things as appropriate and necessary. You can use different color stickies for different tasks that you have or your board has. So it can be a really nice visual for people who work this way, and so that everybody is literally and figuratively on the same page. It's a wonderful tool. So, all right, let's move on to tool number 2, objectives and working goals. So you have to have campaign objectives, and we want to talk to you about what it means, what we're talking about when we say working goal. So this is one of our worksheets, one of our tools from the Capital Campaign Toolkit, and this is where you list out your campaign objectives and how much they're going to cost, so that you can start to put together a working goal for your campaign. This is right at the beginning when you're doing some pre-campaign planning. And I don't know if it's too small. Hopefully you can see it on your screen. I know it's not huge, but first we want to list out the capital projects, right? What are the big things that you're raising money for? Land, building acquisition, new construction, renovation, those types of things, and list out the estimated costs. We also want to include things like capacity building, new programs, startup funds, equipment, and fundraising costs. Really important that you include those fundraising costs and the costs of capacity building, not just the capital projects, in the estimated costs of your campaign, so that you can come up with an initial appropriate working goal. Andrea, what do you want to add to this?
Yeah, just to say that, if you're going to go through the effort of a capital campaign, and it is effort, it's exciting and remarkable, but it is work, serious work. you need to think fully about the kinds of things you want to include in that goal. That it's a shame to have a timid goal that doesn't include things like some capacity building and your fundraising costs. And you know, as you're getting ready and creating your campaign plan, that's the time to get people to think a little more fully, a little more blue sky. And a document like this helps people do that.
Yeah, really thinking through what are the objectives of the campaign? What are you going to be raising funds for? But yeah, as Andrea said, this is the chance to think big. It really is a shame when we get into organizations and they haven't set the goal or the vision high enough. Either they get there too quickly or they don't fundraise for everything they really need. Okay. Andrea, I'm starting to cough, so you talk about the working goal.
All right, yeah. You know, you'll notice that Amy used the phrase working goal, and that has a very particular meaning in the capital campaign world. It is a working goal as opposed to a published goal. That is the other kind of goal. And we use in the capital campaign business a working goal from the time we begin the campaign planning until we get to the kickoff when we announce a public goal. Now, the quiet phase of a campaign doesn't mean that you can't be talking to anybody about your campaign or your project. What it really means is that you don't want to be announcing a hard and fast dollar goal for your campaign because it may change. Keeping it sort of a draft, a working goal, it's sort of like a draft goal. It's the goal on which you base your gift range chart and other tools that we'll get to, but you want to hold your options open as much as you possibly can. So let's say, for example, that you have a working goal of $10 million and you go through the initial part of your campaign and all of the gifts at the top come in even better and bigger than you thought they would. Well, then it may be that your steering committee sits down before the kickoff and says, listen, you know, we're doing better than we thought we would. Why don't we consider raising the goal before we have a published official goal? Or you may have missed a couple of really big gifts and you may not know where that money's going to come from. And then before the campaign kickoff, you can lower it. Now, sometimes that raising or lowering will also happen after the feasibility study. You can see in part 2 here, where you will have hired a consultant to go out and test with your major donors how much money they're really likely to give towards the campaign. They'll come back with a recommendation that may or may not say you can raise the amount of money that was your initial working goal. And after that, you might want to adjust it either up or down. That then would lead you through the campaign, the quiet phase, and then to this final adjustment before the campaign kickoff. Amy?
Yes.
Coughing?
Yes, I had stopped coughing, fortunately. Okay, yeah, so yeah, I mean, here are the two places, as Andrea said, that there are opportunities to adjust that working goal. And, you know, one of the things that we run into with organizations is that up front here, somewhere between 1 and 2, maybe in 3, they're ready to publish a campaign brochure. And we have to put on the brakes, usually, of some eager board members, maybe of executive directors who are ready to publish a highly produced, glossy campaign brochure. But the beauty of campaign planning and even the quiet phase is it's an opportunity to really engage your largest donors and talk about your plan and your vision, get their feedback and input and the initial gifts, and really have the opportunity to see what you can raise without going public, before you go public with a fancy brochure or a major announcement. And the reason that this is really important is because we want your campaigns to be successful. And that means that when you kick off and when you go into the public phase and celebrate your campaign at the end, we want it to be a celebration. Whatever ultimately you decide you can raise, after the quiet phase, you have another opportunity to adjust your working goal before it's your sort of quote unquote final official campaign goal. And so it really benefits you to have a successful campaign at the end, because that will dictate how much you can raise moving forward. If people see you as having a failed or a stalled campaign, future fundraising is much harder than if you're able to celebrate. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll necessarily be able to raise all the money that you want to, that you visioned big at the beginning. You may have to have a campaign in phases or in two parts. Or you may just have to scale back your project, but at least you haven't publicly announced this enormous number that ultimately you never get to. I hope I explained that well. Anything else, Andrea, before we move on?
Actually, we have a question
Yep.
that relates. Kimberly had said, we are considering doing a small campaign to retrofit our current facility with a long-term goal of launching a big capital campaign for a new building in 5 to 7 years, and asks, will doing a smaller one now take away from doing a major launch later?
Yeah, Kimberly, that's a terrific question. And here's my thought about it: that if you are careful and do it well, you can use the smaller retrofit campaign as a way of building stronger relationships with the donors, who will then become the largest donors in your next bigger campaign. And I think that's terrific. So you should be sharing with them the fact that this is going to last for a certain number of years, and here's why you need to do it now. But you do expect to build a facility later, right? You don't want to be surprising them that the retrofit is going to last forever, and you want to invite them into some of those discussions. So you can structure it as a small campaign, as though it were a big campaign. But realize that, if you're in development, that these relationships, these major relationships with the largest donors, grow over time. And if you treat them well, if you involve them in the planning, if you take care of them and tell them what their money has done, if you use the campaign to draw them in, then going forward, they will only be more happy to support you.
Yep. Okay, so, and there's my little announcement of the official goal at the kickoff. So, but let's keep going, because we've got 4 more tools to get through, Andrea. So let's talk about.
I told you I could talk about this forever, Amy.
Yeah.
I'll do my best not to.
The tool number 3 is the case for support. And, I think that this is a tool that most people do understand. It talks about why your project matters, what will be accomplished during the campaign, why your organization is uniquely situated to be doing this particular project, and why now, why at this moment, why not in 5 years or 5 years ago. So these are the types of things that the case for support addresses. One of the really important things that we want you to remember that your case for support is for is that, or is a tool for, that up until that public kickoff, this case for support can be labeled with the words draft. You can use watermark or put it at the top. And it's a really wonderful opportunity to go and visit all of your biggest donors and your biggest potential donors to get their feedback and input on your case, and they will help shape it, excuse me, before it goes live and gets published officially.
Yeah, this is one of these wonderful opportunities to pay attention to the standard fundraising phrase, which, if you want money, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. You've probably all heard that. And the question is, what can we ask people for advice about? Right? So a draft of your case for support is a wonderful thing to ask people for advice about, because if they read it and look at it, they actually will have advice. Nothing is worse than asking people for advice they can't give you. case for support is advice they really can give you. You can do it by pulling together small groups to talk about a draft case for support. You can do it by, as Amy said, meeting with sending it to one donor or another, asking for advice. The challenge is this: you want to structure your advice gathering through the case for support in a way that protects you from any off-the-wall person. So you want to structure the process of asking for advice about the case so that people understand that they are one voice among many. And if you do that either by organizing groups or telling people that you're sending it out to 10 people for advice, and then you can report back to them the collective advice, then you will protect yourself from the crazy person that says, I think you should be talking about elephants instead of peacocks or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is another reason, an example of why you don't want a published brochure at the beginning of your campaign. Because if you give somebody a glossy, finished looking, highly produced campaign brochure, then their advice is not relevant. There are going to be no changes, and they know it. But if you give them a Word document with draft stamped on it, then they know that they're actually part of the process, or they feel more part of the process.
And they really are part of the process. I mean,
yeah.
This can't be phony. It really has to be real. You have to listen. You're asking them. You better listen to what they say. You don't have to agree with it, but you better listen.
Yes. Jay, any questions before we move on to tool number 4?
In fact, you kind of anticipated one, because Sherry had asked about what you'd use for a quiet phase, if not a campaign brochure, something glossy, what you would use in the quiet phase. You talked about that with the case. Are there any other materials that you think would be pertinent, that in addition to something that's marked draft?
So these days, I mean, my advice to most organizations that we guide is to use a draft of the case, a simple Word document, occasionally with some visual material, but nothing that is beautifully designed. And you can not only can you stamp it draft, you can actually date the drafts, because you will be changing it as you go. But a simple Word document, it's amazing how effective it is. These days, I've actually also been working with my clients on what I call a donor engagement tool, which my friends at For Impact have pioneered, and it's a big like 18 by 24 document that's simply, it's a discussion document for one-on-one meetings. If you get in touch with us with that, ask about donor engagement tools, we will send you to some material on that. That's interesting to look at. And you will also use a gift range chart, which Amy is about to talk to you about.
Yeah, but Andrea, so you said you could bring along visuals. I just wanted to give everybody an example of what that might be. And it might be an architectural rendering or a drawing. That's or right. A preliminary blueprint. So in terms of visuals, nothing has to be final or finished. But if you do have a visual to share, like a blueprint or a drawing from an architect, that's a wonderful visual to share with people. All right, tool number 4, gift range chart. Andrea, kick us off.
Yes, so the gift range chart, which you see a sample of here, is it is a core planning document for your campaign. This is a simple one from the toolkit for a campaign, a fairly small campaign of $2.5 million. And as you can see, it's a $2.5 million working goal. So, here's what's tricky about a gift range chart. I imagine you've all seen these. They are a cross between, science and magic. I mean, they are based roughly on the Pareto principle, sort of showing how many gifts you need in order to raise the goal. And you can see that this one shows you need one gift of $500,000, and that the top level of gifts here, the leadership level of gifts, raises 72% of your campaign goal. 72%. If you look at the list, at the number of gifts on the left, and we add up the gifts there, 8, that's 12, 13, 14, that's 15 gifts that would have come in for 72% of your campaign goal. Now, this is not going to be the right chart for every organization. They do vary some. Sometimes if you have a very small donor pool, right, your top gift might not be 20%, it might have to be 25 or even 30% of your campaign goal. And there are small, organizations with a very small pool of major donors. If you have a much broader number of donors, you may be able to have a 15% gift at the top of your chart. But don't get me wrong, this is a sort of a semi-mathematical pattern that will show people with some clarity how you might expect gifts to come in to reach your working goal. Right here, one gift of $500,000, two gifts of $250,000, four gifts of 100, and so on going forward.
Yeah, Andrea, you mentioned the Pareto principle, but just for anybody who doesn't know what that is or by that name, it's the 80-20 rule. You probably know it at that, where 80% of your donors are likely to give 20% of the dollars, and 20% of the donors are likely to give 80% of the dollars. And sometimes we see it even more extreme than that, especially when we're looking at major gifts and campaigns. 10% of your donors could give 90% of your dollars. And as shown here, the first 15 donors get you to 72% of your goal. I mean, if you drop down even one more line, the first 25 donors gets you to over 80% of your goal. And so this applies to campaigns. Campaigns are about the few who make a really huge difference. It's not about fundraising from the masses. At the end, your base of support, you can reach out to everybody, but they generally give the last 10% of your campaign goal. As you see here, it's the last 5% really.
And that's hard work, but we talked before about why you should do it, that last 5%. There are a couple of other things to notice about this gift range chart. You'll see the column on the two columns on the far right, a prospect multiplier and prospects needed. So you know, as does most everybody, that you are not going to get every gift you ask for at the level that you ask for it. It just doesn't happen. That's not the way the world works. And if you do, you haven't been asking for enough. Right? That's the reality. So what we like to include in this version of the gift range chart is a reminder that for each of those gifts, you need more than one prospect. And as you look down this prospect multiplier, it may surprise you to see that the multiplier from the number of gifts you need to the number of prospects goes up as the amount of the gift goes down. That's surprising, and often in annual fund, we look at it the other way around. But for capital campaigns, if you're going into a capital campaign and you haven't built a strong relationship with your top donors, if you don't know who they are and they don't know who you are, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. So because that is where you will have put the bulk of your energy in building your development program, it is likely that there will only be one or two people for the top gifts that you will have to go to. And if you've done a good job building those relationships, you're likely to get it. Does that make sense, Amy?
Yeah, I think that leads us beautifully into the depth chart, because we're going to talk about who those prospects are that you were just mentioning. So let's quickly take a look at the depth chart, and we have several slides here. So let me just go through the first two, and then I'll let you add, Andrea. So the first gift level, here we say we need three prospects, or three gifts for 6 prospective donors for their top 3 gifts. And if we go back quickly to the gift range chart, you'll see the top 3 gifts, the first 3 gifts, one at $500,000 and 2 at $250,000. That's what we're going to count in our first gift level here. Our gift level 1 is the top 2 gift ranges. We need 3 total gifts and 6 prospects. So we really need 6 individual names here of people we're going to ask for gifts of over $250,000. And that's what a depth chart is. A depth chart helps us figure out who we're going to ask for gifts at what level.
Yeah, essentially it translates the gift range chart into actual names. It's where the rubber meets the road. So you begin with a gift range, with a gift chart, saying, okay, what are the levels of gifts that we're going to need to get to our goal? And then you say, all right, now who do we know at which level? And it's common when you're in campaign planning mode that you're going to find some holes in this chart. Hopefully not at the top level, but probably in the middle level you may have some holes. That's going to point you in the direction of what you're